Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host today. I'm excited to introduce you to Heidi Nisbet. Heidi was a really fun conversation because she really loves the outdoors, but specifically the Appalachian Trail, and I do too. So we had a ton to talk about. She has spent much more time on the trail, though, than I have, as she thru hiked at the age of 25. She never saw herself as a big-time outdoors person, as she was always into creative things. You'll find that the art and creativity came out of her from a very early age, even when she was told not to do it. It was actually quite a funny story. Heidi has accomplished a lot around the outdoors, but the thing that I took from it more than anything else is that she has figured out how to merge her hobbies, her passions, and her career all in the same direction. She guides groups onto the Appalachian Trail at different points of the year, but some of those guiding trips, she takes art supplies and teaches art classes while in the outdoors. She also does her own adventure hiking in different places, mostly on the East Coast, but continues to come back to the AT, and that just has a strong draw for her. You'll find that before the trail, she had a story in her head that she was weaker than everyone else. But after through hiking and completing almost 2,200 miles in the same direction, the story she tells herself now is that she's strong and that she can do things. And I find that fascinating, that the harder she pushed herself, the stronger the story was that came back to her. So enjoy the conversation. Without further ado, here's Heidi Nisbet. Heidi Nisbet, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. You and I have a common friend in Brew Davis, and Brew is my very first guest on here, and we've kind of launched into, I think by the time this is released, we'll be at around 20 episodes, which is still pretty young for the podcast universe, but I really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. So for anybody listening, I always like to start by just giving you the opportunity to tell everyone who you are, where you're at, and maybe some of the things that you're into right now.
Sure. My name is Heidi Nisbet. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I grew up in South Carolina, so Carolina girl. And I am currently, I work almost full-time as an artist. Most of my work is centered around hiking and the outdoors. And then I do also work part-time as a hiking and backpacking guide. I like hiking a lot, as is evident by those two things, and I have done my best to kind of build a career around the things that I'm passionate about so that I don't dread going to work.
That's a great outcome. Now, I'm sure we'll get into this, but that doesn't always happen, or it doesn't always happen very easily for folks. So I'll be interested to hear how you made that work for you. So as I normally do, I'd like to start maybe back towards the beginning for you, and tell us a little bit about where you did grow up in the Carolinas, and a little bit about your childhood. What was that like?
So I grew up in upstate South Carolina. My family is originally from the north. So I was actually born in Ohio, but we moved to South Carolina when I was 8. And I definitely don't have a particularly outdoorsy family, but I have a very athletic and active lifestyle family. And so we grew up hiking because it was something that was close by, and it was an active activity that we could do together. And it definitely, it was never something I minded. I used to run too, and I definitely minded running. I hated that. But hiking was always fine, but I never really thought twice about it. And, I always definitely appreciated nature, and I've definitely been an artist for as long as I can remember. And I think it's very common for those two things to go hand in hand. And then it wasn't really until I went to school in at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So that pushed me a little bit more into the Piedmont. And then after I graduated, stayed in Rock Hill for a few years, moved up to Charlotte, but I got a dog right after I graduated who was incredibly hyperactive and just off the walls. And that's when I learned that the best way to get her energy out was to do hiking with her, and would take her out. I was working a job where I'd have to be at work at 10 a.m. I'd take her out to Crowder's Mountain, which is the state park close to Charlotte. And we would do a 6-mile hike and then I'd get to work at 10 a.m. because that was the only way I could keep her from destroying my house while I was gone. So that's kind of how I got into that. But growing up, never camped and never spent, a whole lot of time outdoors, and was definitely kind of the black sheep in the family, whereas like my brother and sister were super athletic and would, my brother went to state for several years with track. My sister's a marathoner. My parents are both marathoners. And I was like, no, I'm not having it. I'm not running. I'm going to sit in my room and draw. And it was the black sheep in that I wasn't that athletic in comparison. So when I was 24 and announced that I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail, they just looked at me like I had grown a second head. They were like, yeah, right. Absolutely not.
Had you ever done any long distance hiking before committing to that?
No, not long distance. I heard about it actually through my brother's track coach, who he was really big into track in high school. So she was like, our family was pretty close to her. And she attempted it and she did about 900 miles of it until she broke her foot in the Hoosic Notch. But I just heard about that. This is right around the time that I just got this dog and I'm starting to hike a little bit more and curious about this whole backpacking thing and hear about her doing it. And it just sounded, but just something about it really got into my head. And so then I started backpacking with that in mind. Like,
okay.
I thought about it. It was in my head. I couldn't get it out of my head. I was in like, I was 20, 23 and fresh out of college in a job that I didn't like, quit that job for another job that I also didn't like, and just had no idea what direction I was going and didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up or where I wanted to go. And I just needed something to kind of focus my energy on. And that just sounded so far from anything I had any experience with. And it was really scary and it was really exciting. And for some reason, that's just what I fixated on and put all of my energy towards that, trying to figure out what would go into it. So before I thru hiked, I had done, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 backpacking trips with a friend for 2 or 3 nights, kind of in preparation for it.
That's brilliant. So I've heard this before with the AT specifically, that seed gets planted and there's something magical about how it grows, in almost like growing in your soul, that it keeps calling until you go do something about it.
There's something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to come back to that, but how did you get to, and first of all, where in Ohio were you born?
Near Cleveland,
Okay.
Menor. So that my dad's family is still up there, but I actually don't. I've gone back a few times, but it was much easier to convince our cousins to come to South Carolina for family vacations than it was to convince us to go to Ohio.
Yeah. I lived a couple different times in around Columbus, so never got that as far north as Cleveland. But so South Carolina, in which part of South Carolina did you grow up in?
Boiling Springs, which is in Spartanburg County.
Okay.
So over there.
Spartanburg, not too far from Greenville.
Exactly, yeah.
And so you did
45 minutes south of Asheville.
Some camping. Were you into athletics or sports, or was that your siblings' deal?
That was definitely my siblings' deal. I mean, I did, because what else do you do after school? So I played tennis and I enjoyed tennis, and I did run track for several years, but it was, I don't know why. Like, I don't know why I was there. I hated it. I complained about it.
Wasn't your jam.
Yeah, not my jam. I don't like running.
So when did you realize that you loved art?
So that was really young. My mom will tell the story where I ruined her white couch with magic markers when I was like 3. It's just like everything should have color on it. They used to have to tell me like, okay, what do we draw on? And I'd say paper, and they'd say what else? And I'd say nothing else, because I draw all over my walls. And yeah, it's just like, I guess, a lower energy kid, and that just appealed to me a lot more than playing outside or doing whatever my siblings were doing. Was kind of sitting in my room and drawing. And in middle school, fell into a group of friends that were very like-minded, and that really, instigated and inspired. We would just sit around and hang out in our room and draw cartoons and draw comic books and stuff like that. So that was when I started to take it a little bit more seriously. I actually didn't really have that many art classes all through school, because we would do like in elementary school, they had like a whatever honors program where they'd take students out and you'd go and learn algebra a year or two early, but they would take me out of our extracurriculars. So I'd get taken out of art. We didn't have an art class in my middle school. And so I didn't really take a formal art class besides once or twice until high school, but knew that was exactly what I wanted to do, and took an AP class in high school. Had a few different ideas about what I wanted to go to school for, but once I started school touring colleges and saw their art departments and saw, these huge rooms dedicated to it, and the smell of paint and the smell of, the different supplies and just charcoal on every surface, I was just completely fascinated and knew that that's what I wanted to study.
Was that your major at Winthrop?
It was, yeah. So I have a painting and a printmaking degree.
Painting, and what was the second word?
Printmaking. So printmaking is like, for those who are not familiar, like relief and intaglio and screen printing were the three areas that we focused. But basically, the mediums of doing mass production before digital printing, which still serves as its own art form. Most people are probably familiar with screen printing because that's how a lot of t-shirts are made.
Gotcha. That's really cool. What strikes me though too is from a very early age, that creativity couldn't help but come out. And your parents trying to put boundaries on it and tell you it was okay to do it didn't really work. So.
Well, I've gotten a few mural jobs this past year, started doing some murals, and that's kind of taking off with a good bit of momentum. So now I get to look at my mom and be like, what do we paint on? Everything. And they're paying me for it too. So
that is full circle. That's cool. That's very cool. Now, was it what I want to get to is, where does art and nature overlap for you? And you said a minute ago that you really kind of fell in love with the outdoors at some point. Was that after college, as you're getting closer to this point of wanting to do the AT, that you realized that, being outside is something really special for my soul?
Yeah, so I had definitely a period of burnout with art, kind of like my senior year, going into like post-grad life of like, what now, what, like, what the hell are you supposed to do with, I'm sorry, am I allowed to cuss on this podcast?
You can say whatever you want to, whatever you want.
I'll try to keep it somewhat PGs, but I was just like, yeah, so what now? I went to school studying art because studying art looked fun. I had no intentions of trying to make a living of it. The only thing I knew about making a living of it was that it was really hard to do. And then, quite frankly, and I have a lot of really good things to say about my college education as well, but I do not feel like they prepared us very well for doing anything besides coming back to school and getting a master's degree in fine arts, which we would do in order to come back to school to teach fine arts. So it was very like at a loss for why or how or what would I create. And the kind of art that we created in college was very different from the kind of art that I created, and kind of the direction and the path we were put on was very different from the art that I make now. And it was a lot more explorative and experimental and hard to sell. And I just wasn't sure what the path was for how to actually make money that way. And without that, had very little inspiration or idea of like what to create. So I went through this period of kind of like breaking up with art, not really having anything to do with it. And that's where I think I started to feel very lost, because that had been such a big part of my identity. And so that's when I start finding hiking. I have all of this energy. I'm a very like goal driven, dedicated, like overworking kind of person. And so to have all this pent up energy and nowhere to put it was really like, I just felt really, really lost. And so when somebody was like, oh, you can hike 2,000 miles from Georgia to Maine, and I was just like, okay, that sounds like a great thing to just shove all of my energy into. And that's what I did. And so this is I turned 25 like my first month on trail, right? So it's just a few years after college, a few years of not creating. But right before I started, I did make the decision to carry a sketchbook and a small set of watercolor paints with me, which I didn't have any experience with watercolor. It's just portable and easy to take. And just, I knew that the experience was going to be special and I wanted to record it. I didn't really have any goals of what to do with those paintings. A lot of them were not quote unquote good paintings. They were like scribbles in a journal in a raining tent, but it was a very interesting way. And actually, like, I consider myself very lucky to have that skill set in my arsenal, because it's a very unique way of capturing the journey, and being able to express emotions and things that would come up throughout the day, and visuals that would come up repetitively, that I could capture in a journal, that if you don't have some basic drawing skills, you're not going to be able to do. So those sketchbooks that I kept were very special to me, and they did generate like a lot of attention. Like I got a trail name based off of the fact that I was painting and drawing on the trail, and people were asking me questions and looking through it, and I would share it with anybody. I was always happy to do that. So then it was when I finished the AT that I decided to kind of recreate some of those paintings from the sketchbook that were very rough around the edges, and make them into slightly larger paintings, a little bit cleaner, put them in a frame and put them on a wall somewhere, and then have gone in that direction since then.
That's cool. Do you have a gallery space, or how do you sell your artwork?
So when I finished the AT, it was very serendipitous. I came back to Charlotte because that's where I had a place that I was subleasing. Didn't have a job or anything lined up here, and there's a brewery in Charlotte that was themed around the AT, so I walked in and applied, and I have some customer service and like restaurant experience, but nothing in craft beer. But it just worked out really well. They were thrilled to have somebody who had just gone off the trail. They wanted somebody that could implement more community in Charlotte. So that was an incredible for me. There's been a lot of me through the brewery. But anyways,
let me ask you about that real quick. You said it's a brewery themed on the AT, but the AT has white blazes, and this is called Blue Blaze. So tell me about that.
So think of it like this way. Blue Blazes will lead you off of the Appalachian Trail to your shelters and watering holes. And this is a watering hole for hikers off of the AT.
Oh, I totally get that.
There you go. Yeah. So we're in Charlotte. We're not on a trail town. And it's themed around all things outdoor recreation, but just going for that kind of, outdoorsy vibe and community, and providing a space for that community here in Charlotte. Yeah, so it's really, really heartbreaking to lose it, even if it is just temporary, because it's been really, really great to have that space, and I can talk about that more too. But coming back to your question, I came back, applied for this job, and my boss was very much, okay, like whatever you have to offer, we'll take it. Okay, so you have this art background as well. Do you want to start curating rotating art shows? So I would find a local artist to have their artwork hung for 3 months.
That's cool.
And then pick a new one and a new one. And so because I had that opportunity, I was like, okay, then I choose me for a few months from now. And so I had a few other artists first. And then once I had time to kind of recreate this body work, had this sort of retrospective of my experience on the trail, hung all the work and sold everything, and had, definitely didn't at the time have a huge online following, but like, of course, a lot of people were interested in that experience, and, friends of friends. And so we had an opening art reception. I had like 30 people show up, and everything sold right off the walls then. And so that's when I was like, oh, like if you're making, certain kind of art, you can sell it and people will buy it and they'll be excited for it. And then you can, have a career in that direction. So from there, slowly started to build that up as like a side hustle with commissions. And so for years, I was working full time at the brewery. So I was mostly just doing commissions on the side, like on my version of a weekend, right? For a few years. And then more opportunities started to present themselves until I could kind of make a leap of faith and try to take it on a little bit more full time.
And is that what you do at this point? Your artwork is full-time work?
Yes, I do guide, and that's a really fun and exciting experience. And I think even if I didn't need that money, it would still be something that I would explore. But guiding is good, like consistent, seasonal, right? So it's just for the warmer, just like March through October, but it's good to have consistent and reliable income. And it's actually really what a big thing about it is that it's kind of like not my responsibility decides when I'm actually out there with my clients. So, and what I more mean by that is it's money that I can make without having to spend money, right? So
Yeah.
owning your own business is a lot of figuring out like where to invest money and where, and how to make sure you get a profit out of this. So to have a form of income where I just like can show up and work and go home and get a paycheck is, I'll probably hold on to that for as long as I can because I need to. And then additionally, because it's just an awesome job and I wouldn't want to give that up.
How big are the groups that you guide?
So we normally like 6 would be the max, 6 or 7 plus me. I work for Blue Ridge Hiking Company, which is Brew's wife, Jennifer Fardavis. She founded that company about 14 or 15 years ago and sold it to Lindsay, who was our manager. She bought it last year. But yeah, I'll take out groups of, it could be just one other person. It can be, I'd say my average is probably 3 or 4, and then up to like 6 or 7, kind of depending on the permit in the area that we're hiking in.
Gotcha. Do you get to pick the spots, or is that dictated for you by what the group's interested in?
Kind of works in 2 different ways. Typically we have group trips and private trips. So if it's private trips, I might be involved in the conversation based off of what the client is interested in doing. For group trips, they're predetermined routes. So a lot of those are just routes that we know work really well. I do have the opportunity to provide my own offering. So I can come to them and say, here's an itinerary that I think would be a cool thing to guide. And if it works into the schedule, they'll put it on. And if I get people to sign up, I get to do it. So for example, I do a watercolor hike where we do a 3-day 2-night backpacking trip. It comes with all of the supplies that you need for painting, that are lightweight to carry for backpacking that I use on my long hikes and teach that while I'm out there. So I get to dictate some of them. And then we have our go-to AT max patch to hot springs, tried and true. It works. I'll guide that route 8 times in a season. So
yeah, you can probably do it in your sleep at this point.
I know where all of the chicken of the woods mushrooms grow between max packs and hot springs. I know where all the chanterelles grow. I know when the tiger lilies are blooming. I know where the lady slippers grow. I've got that route down.
That's cool. What is your favorite section of the AT? This is always a dangerous question because I never know where it's going to go. So do you have one? And it's okay if you don't, but how would you answer that?
Well, it's interesting because I think I normally get that question as what is your favorite state? And I'm like, oh, it's Virginia or Maine. It's always a toss up between Virginia and Maine. But since you asked section, actually my first thought is Roan Highlands. I love the Roan Highlands. We actually just got permits to guide there. So I'm super excited about that. So that's probably my favorite, little stretch that, if I were to do a week on the 18, I actually did that last year. I went out and just hiked for 6 days. Forget where we started, but we ended at 19E going northbound. So we went through there, and I've been back to the Roan Highlands a few dozen times. So, but from my through hike experience, Virginia and Maine, and a big part of that is like I loved so much of North Carolina and Tennessee, but it was snowing on me when I walked through in March and April. So it wasn't the highlight of my trip.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a financial planner in my day job, but this outdoor adventure hiking stuff is an absolute love. And I've tried to get my kids involved early. In fact, my oldest son, who's now in college, before I really knew anything about the AT, a buddy of mine convinced me to go hike a section through Grayson Highlands with him. And my son was, I think, 8 or 9 at the time. And I had no idea what we were getting into, and nor was I prepared with any experience. So I look back on that and go, I could have either ruined him for being on the trail, or he realized how great it is and how he can push through and do hard things and learn that about himself. And that's ultimately what happened. He still likes going back, looking to do a section with his friends coming up. But a couple of years ago, I took him to Roan Mountain or Roan Highlands and did a real small section. I think we were only out a couple nights and finished at 19E. In fact, we left our car there's a hostel not far off the trailhead right there. And we got there at about midnight and the bar was still raging downstairs. The hostel was upstairs.
At the station.
Yeah. Yep. And I was like, I don't know that. Anyway, we ended up sleeping in the yard next to it and got up early the next morning and headed out. But that section, that area of the States and the AT, I just absolutely fell in love with it. So that's cool that you brought that one up.
super cool spot.
Cool. So I want to go back to your launching into the AT, because what that says to me is I don't know if permeates your whole life, but I mean, that's not dipping your toe in the water. That's diving headfirst into the deep end to go from not really backpacking through hiking the AT, in my opinion. So what do you think about that? Does it feel that way
Yeah,
to you?
yes. I'm not really like a hobbies kind of person. I noticed that when I find something that I'm going to get into, I get really, really into it. So it makes it hard to have hobbies. I tried to take up crocheting over COVID, and I was like,
Mhm.
I will make 8,000 baby blankets. And I was like, okay, we have to put this away because we can't just do things. I can't just do things, I can't just dip my toes in it. If I get into
Yeah.
something, I want to like get really, really into it. And so I do art and hiking because I don't have time for other things, because I'm as far in as I can get on both of those.
Yeah. So
Um,
tell me a little bit about planning for going to the AT. So again, as a financial planner, my mind goes to, well, you can't just jump in and do these things.
oh
At
no.
the same
Yeah,
time, I
I
know some people
was
that do, but tell me a little bit about your planning leading up to preparing to take, I don't know, 3 or 4 months out of society to do this.
yeah, 6 months. It was all about money. So I was, working, I was getting probably paid $15 an hour. And I had nothing saved up and had thought about it for a little while and just couldn't really get my bank account for the AT over $1,000, just because life just kept happening and I kept on not having money to pay for the vet bill or whatever I needed. And so I had been working in Rock Hill and I got a job in Charlotte for an art museum. And I was like, this is what your degree's in. You need to put this AT thing on hold. You need to take this job. This is like, you need to build a career, right? Do the thing that you're supposed to do. And so I
Yeah.
moved up to Charlotte for this job. And within just a few months, realized that I wasn't getting the salary and benefits that they told me I was going to get promoted to immediately upon, like, we just need to wait until next quarter, so we're going to start you on $15 an hour, but next quarter you're going to get this salary, you're going to get benefits. I left a job with benefits and then they just never gave it to me, and my boss left on maternity leave, and it was a whole slew of things, and I just
Yeah.
realized I was completely lied to and brought into this position just to cover so she could go have her baby, and I was probably going to get laid off as soon as she came back.
Oh
And
my
sure enough, she came
gosh.
back and I got knocked down to part-time. But I kind of read the writing on the wall, and this was like in June. So between June of 2017 and March 2018, I found 10 grand, and I don't know how I did it, but I was eating ramen and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I was walking neighbors' dogs. I picked up a part-time job teaching painting classes. I just worked nonstop. And within that period of time, somehow managed to save up, like, I think I had exactly 10 grand in my bank account, and found somebody to sublease the apartment and was on the trail.
That was it.
So that's, I mean, I spent so much time just trying to find the money for it that I really didn't get to do a whole lot else. I watched a lot of YouTube because that was easy to do. I did get out on trail once or twice. I bought some gear. I bought a lot of the wrong gear. I had a lot of preconceived notions that I was like determined about, or like for me, what a big thing was is like I felt so frugal that if I bought something, if I found out later that that probably wasn't the best thing, I was like, no, I bought it. I already paid for this. Like, I'm going to make it work. Like early on, I decided that I needed a pair of Chacos. I never had a pair of Chacos. Like, I wasn't that outdoorsy girl, right? So I never had a
Yeah.
pair of Chacos. I was like, okay, well, hikers wear Chacos, and buying some Chacos. Bought some Chacos. They come in the mail. I was like, shit, these are heavy. And then I'm like, nope, these are my camp shoes. I'm bringing them with me. And everybody's like, don't bring Chacos with you. Those are way too heavy. And I'm like, no, I need them because I bought them. They were $75 and I have to have these. So
Yes.
I was like definitely causing a little bit of resistance for myself. But anyways, I just did watched a lot of YouTube. I think I had a very good idea of what to expect from the trail and from the experience. I think a lot of people go into the AT thinking it's something different than it is.
Mm-hmm.
I anticipated it actually being a lot harder than it was, having not been the athletic one growing up. I was just used to being at the back of the pack,
Mm-hmm.
and used to like things feeling like more physically hard for me than everyone else, just because wasn't that serious about training or anything like that. And then came to find out like I'm a strong hiker, I'm a decent hiker. Like I'm not setting FKTs, but I'm pretty good at it. And so I was actually surprised to find it easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was, I was 25, so of course it's easy enough to go up a mountain. And I don't know, other from that, I had to find like a place for my dog to stay, which was really hard. I thought it was going to be me and Junie against the world because that's what it had been for the last few
Mm-hmm.
years. So of course Junie was going to come with me. And in one of my shakedown hikes, actually in Grayson Highlands, found out very quickly how unrealistic that was, with me not really know what I'm doing to take care of myself, to also take care of her, and how much heavier my pack was going to be and how much more expensive the trip was going to be. And how do you even go into, a visitor center to go to the bathroom when you can't leave your dog, when you can't bring your dog in with you and stuff. So that was a big hurdle for me. And I really thought it wasn't going to be able to happen, but I had a aunt, uncle visit for Thanksgiving, and they knew that I was trying to plan this thing, and this had just come up where I realized that Junie wasn't going to be able to come, and they were just like, how about we just take her, we have a dog, we have 3 kids, it'll be fine. And they did, and I was able to go about being gone for 6 months. So
that is cool. So what I've recognized about people that either spend time on trails for longer times or even through hiking, a lot of times they're either running from something or running towards something, and maybe a combination of both. But when I say that, does one or the other resonate with you? What was going on with you in your life at the moment that you were stepping foot on the Appalachian Trail?
yeah, I think a little bit of both. I was definitely like not loving being an adult and not really sure what to do with that, like how to do it or where to take my life. So it's kind of like using it, as a gap year, as an opportunity to step away. But with how much I have kind of built everything else around that, I definitely think, like I said earlier, it's just like I'm a goal-oriented person and I like to have something to work towards. And that's, I think, what I craved the most. And then found such an awesome community and such a love for the outdoors and for being outdoors, and rekindled my love for art on the trail as well, that I very quickly within that hike realized that I was like running towards just like, how do I be hiker trash, and I don't mean that as an escapism, but like, here's a lifestyle, and here are components, like here are my people, and how can I stay in this community. And a big goal was, how can I make adventure sustainable? How can I not have to scrimp and save and work 5 jobs so that I can just come out here and hike for 6 months? How can I figure out how to do this consistently and incorporate it into a life and still, do all the things I want to do, like get married and have a house. And so I think, I've been successful in that so far, and I'm on a good trajectory for that now, like 5 years later, where I get to hike for a living. I've had the opportunity to do several other long distance trails because I work for myself, and I'm in 1099. Or like when I worked for the brewery, I was like, here's the deal, like, I'm going to run off and hike another trail one of these days. You just have to be cool with that. And they were. And so, just figuring out ways that I can, find success and find a way to make that lifestyle work for me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, in some ways, you found your identity there, and post trail have worked really hard to build your life around that identity rather than the other way around.
Right.
Which is really, really cool. That takes some guts to, plant a stake in the ground and say, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. Come hell or high water, we're going to make it work. And I loved what you just said about how to make adventure sustainable. Again, my planner mind goes, you can do a lot of things one time, but if you fall in love with it, how do you make it happen over and over again in such a way that you can, pull it off, but also so that it doesn't become boring. You're not doing the same thing over and over again. So tell me a little bit more about what sustainable looks like for you as you've gotten older since the finishing the trail.
Yeah. So a big part was like time off. Like, it's just really disheartening to think about the kind of the 9 to 5 career system that I was on the path for and that a lot of people are. And because you get like some people get 2 or 3 weeks of PTO, and it's not even that it's like, that's great that it's paid. I don't get any paid time off, but that's all you're allowed to take all year. You don't really get to go to your boss and say, can I also have an additional other 4 weeks, and you just don't have to pay me. Like, you have a job and that job needs to get done. And so going into the brewery, working for a small family business that was oriented around this, so they get it. They know, they hired me because I did this. So of course they're going to understand when I turn around and say, like, hey, this other trail's calling. I need to do something about it. And there's challenges with that. Like, I was more or less running that bar, so I had to like make sure that my responsibilities were covered and help, train other people and stuff. But, working hourly, nobody's there to tell you, oh, you only get 2 weeks a year. I can turn around and say, well, you're not going to pay me, so I'm going to be gone. Like, I'm going to be gone. You just don't pay me.
Yeah.
And I met my husband right after I finished the AT, and he was kind of in a similar position where he really enjoys travel and was, working a job and wanted to go to Nepal for a trip. And if he was going to make that trip over, he wanted to stay for more than 2 weeks. So he just told his job, hey, I'm going to quit because I want to go to Nepal for a month. And they're like, well, wait, why do you have to quit? He's like, oh, well, I only have 2 weeks of PTO. And they're like, oh, well, why don't you just go to Nepal and do what you need to do? And then when you come back, call us and we'll probably still have your job for you. And so he had kind of worked that into his job, where he was also like, no, listen, I want to travel. This is my priority. If I can take a month off during the slow season, I'm going to. And so he kind of set that precedent with them. And then for me, a big part, was shifting out of the brewery, because that was a burden to have those responsibilities and feel responsible for the space. And then also be like, but I want to go spend a week on the Mount Sissy Trail. So shifting away from that into the guiding position, which is 1099 and seasonal and very understanding and very, willing to work with our schedules. And then also into my own art business, where I can figure out, like, if I can afford it, I can go. And then in addition to that, now I'm setting myself up for positions where I can get paid to go. And so I think I can say this now because I think we're official enough for it, but like, I'm partnering with the Allegheny Trail in West Virginia this year to do a through hike of the 300-mile trail through West Virginia and create paintings along the way as a form of marketing for them to use to advertise their trail, to get word out about it, to have this unique imagery and insight to the experience of the Allegheny Trail, and to get that in front of other people to build momentum. And
yeah,
so
that's the ticket, to be able to merge the things and get paid for it. It's one thing to say, like I said, plant the stake of, this is my value and I'm going to do this whether you guys like it or not, and it's okay if you don't pay me. But then to marry the two, to say, I'm doing this and I'm getting paid for it, that's amazing.
It's kind of one or two ways. And I meet a lot of hikers who will do, maybe they're seasonal, like working at ski resorts, and then they have the warmer months to hike. And I think that works, and that's great too. And part of me is always like, oh, like, that's on the back burner, I can do that. But I noticed, like, kind of as soon as I entered the workforce out of college, is if I don't care about my job, I mentally do not show up. And I'm like typically an overachiever. So that's really hard for me to like not be good at something. But if I don't care about it, I just don't care about it.
Yeah.
So it's worked better for me to have, have work that I'm excited to wake up and go to work tomorrow. Now, the challenge of that has been that it's not as fun. I'm like finally at the point, okay, if I can afford it, I can go. And now it becomes a lot harder to afford it because, I'm not getting a consistent paycheck. And there's a lot to figure out from a business perspective on how to make money doing art. But I feel like I'm getting there. And then to like kind of merge the two and get paid to do what I would want to do anyways, is kind of the ideal situation.
Yeah, I mean, you're making it the top priority in your life, whether it's art or being outside. And I think to some extent, as human beings, when we set that target and we're relentless about it being the target, you'll figure out a way. Put your head through a brick wall, especially for somebody like you that's goal oriented, that likes to have that thing out in front, and then get out of my way. I'm going to make it happen.
And another part of it too, and I'll bring it up because I'm like that people wonder, and people ask me this, is we don't plan to have kids. And so that eliminates the responsibility of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
like I think if we had kids, it'd be a lot more, like we would have to be a lot more worried about consistency and
Hmm.
with income and not doing that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying there's not a way to do that with kids, but not having them and not planning to have them certainly makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's anything is within reason can be figured out. So having kids, I I don't know that I did it very well. As our kids came along, it took several years before we even tried anything with the kids. But I see other folks like Brew and Jen that figured out things early on. But regardless of that, it is infinitely more difficult to do it when you have
Everything is
infinitely
infinitely
more
more
difficult.
different.
Yeah,
Like cooking dinners, and so I
infinitely
have
more
a
difficult.
I have a niece who's one, and my brother has a 1-year-old, and they have twins on the way, and I'm just like, wow, it looks so
Yeah,
hard. And like my best friend has a 4-year-old, and that's just an only child. That's just one of them, and it's just
yeah.
a force to be reckoned with. It's so parenting looks like the hardest thing in the world, and I
It
just
ain't for the
decided
faint of
it's not for
heart, that's
me.
for sure.
Yeah,
But
it's too
it's
hard.
it's a different kind of hard. I think in your case, you're pursuing things that are hard. I mean, the stuff that you've described you're doing and making work in your life, most people would look at that and go, "Yeah, I just don't know that I got it. I don't know that I'm cut out for that kind of uncertainty." Because I think again, as humans, maybe we've evolved from a point and to a point to really, really, really value certainty in our life. And
Hmm.
first, in your case, you got a lot of uncertainty, and maybe that's where your goal orientation really drives you to make that uncertainty work. But a lot of people look at that and go, "I just can't handle it. I can't. I'm not cut out for that, and it's too hard." So to
Yeah.
me, I think what you're doing is exceptionally difficult as well. Just as parenting is, it's just different.
It is. It's a lot of, thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, it's a lot of being nervous about, what if I don't get this job, and what if,
Hmm.
what does let next month's income look like, or what happens if this trip gets canceled. But I will, my husband does work a consistent job with a salary, and so that has been a big part of me being able to kind of take this leap of faith, is that he can
Sure.
serve as a safety net. So I'm very thankful to have that, and that does make it a lot more capable to do. But that being said, it's not going to be something I continue to pursue if it doesn't, when I started it, I was like, okay, I'm giving myself 3 to 5 years, and if I can't make this profitable, if I can't make a decent income like what I was making at the brewery or more, then this
Hmm.
is not going to be something I'm pursuing after 5 years. I'm not going to put that much time into it. And
Yeah.
so I've been at it for, like, I 2021 was kind of when I started it, more or less. And so as more than a side hustle, and like got my official business and all of the things. And I feel like this year finally kind of starting the year off on the right leg and feeling a little bit more
Mm.
consistent and optimistic. But the first 2 years are definitely just like, crap, I'm just wasting this time and wasting this
Mm.
money, because it's taken a lot of money to start it up, and have been very concerned about that. And that's when part of my head is like, I could have, all this money I put in this business, I could have through hiked the PCT by now, what are you doing? So
Yeah.
I'm feeling very relieved to feel like things are looking up and looking a little bit more sustainable for 2024.
Yeah, I think no matter what stage you are in your progress with these goals, there's always that head trash. I mean, it just that negative voices that are telling you that you're making mistakes, and you just got to keep moving forward. And
Mm-hmm.
those will eventually get drowned out. But I think it's interesting too, in the same way that you just described your pre-AT thoughts about yourself versus the post-AT thoughts about yourself. I'm trying to remember the words you use, but I'm not as strong as my siblings. I don't do these hard things like they do. I'm not sure I can do this. And then on the other side of the hiking, you're like, I'm a strong hiker. I can climb these mountains. I also heard the same thing in what you're describing about your work experience too. Is I'm not sure I can do these. I'm going to take the stable job, keep the income coming, and then it's like, screw it. I'm going to jump into it. And you figured it out along the way. Now, starting this year, to say it's turning the corner and I'm figuring this out. It's still very uncertain. But I think what I'm getting out of this and hearing your story is that you've taken risks, you've been vulnerable at different times to do things that maybe were beyond your reach. And once you accomplished them, it's like it boosted your sense of who you are and what you could accomplish. Is that a fair description?
Yes,
Or
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I really appreciate that description. Tickled.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, yeah, I think so. And you don't know if you don't try. And once I started, making art again after the AT, it was something that just occupied a lot of my thought. Was like, I'd come home from a day of cleaning chewing tobacco out of the urinals in the
Oh,
brewery and be like, why am I still in the service industry? And just be like, I could be. It was just always there. It's like, what happened if I just, I was doing these commissions as a side hustle. I'm doing this art stuff as a side hustles. What could I do if I had all, dedicated more time to this? And so, yeah, it just nagged at me until I finally had the opportunity to do something about it.
yeah, I love that. I mean, that honestly, like the arc of that story in two different settings is really the whole point of why I even want to do this podcast. Not just with you, but like all of them is
Mhm.
what do we learn about ourselves and about the world around us and other people, the universe as it exists? What do we learn when we intentionally do hard things? And you've done it a couple different ways, and I can even hear it in your voice, the confidence that grows in yourself as you've done it. But I think more also, and sometimes hard things are thrust on us whether we like it or not. I don't want to be super Pollyanna about other people's life experiences. Sometimes people live through suffering just because there's no other choice, and that's really difficult. But I think when you have the agency to make different choices in your life, that again, that's what I've heard over and over again in you talking, is that at different points you've taken the reins and said, I'm going to try this and we'll see how it goes. It'll be a little experiment. There's no failure here. It's just a trial in one direction, and if it doesn't work, we'll pivot and do something else. Is that kind of trial mentality, is that natural to you? Do you do that in other areas of your life, or has it just been in these big pivot moments?
That's a good question. I feel like maybe more in the big pivot moments. I mean, like I said earlier, I've kind of just like art and hiking, and that's like, I'm not, I put so much energy into those two things, especially for the last like 5 years, that there's not a whole lot of other stuff that I'm taking a stab at. But, happy to do it for the things that I'm passionate about, and happy to do it kind of as like my way of just being a little bit disgruntled with, I don't know, this concept that we're supposed to spend 40, 50, or 60 hours a week, doing something that doesn't really serve ourselves besides the paycheck that you get. Like I don't know, it's just a bummer to see so many people feeling so burnout, and so, how big of an impact on their mental health and on their physical health that their jobs can have, and me just like being like just refusing to partake. And not
Yeah,
to
I
say that
think,
like I'm not, like, I experience burnout very hardcore and stuff, but just it's because there's an emotional investment and,
yeah,
like a passion. I don't know, it just feels like I'm doing it for me, and I'm not
yeah.
doing it for somebody else, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I think that, in some way you've realized early enough that the framework of 40 or 50 hours a week and the American capitalist society that's built off of, it's like you're giving it a giant middle finger on the way out and saying, I'm going to do this my way, and
Yeah,
I'm going to make it
yeah.
work, which is great. I mean, again, it's agency, it's taking control, and creates a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of stability if you just played the game.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
you're, and I see it even in the mural behind you on the wall. Like by you choosing not to play the game, you get to see those things in the mountains. You get to experience the things that the people that are stuck at a desk job don't get. And it comes with the uncertainty, but it comes with a lot of reward too, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a trade-off, and I don't know, I took my dog for 6 mile hike this morning and yesterday morning, just like on a Tuesday. And I'm like,
Hmm.
put something on Instagram about it where I was like, there's just the benefits of not working a 9 to 5. And it's like, well, I don't get health benefits, and
Yep.
nobody's contributing to my 401k except for me. And I don't get a consistent income. And here are all the things that I don't get. But I do get to take my dog on a 6 mile hike on a Tuesday morning if I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do get to, I don't know, play with paint and pretty colors all day long if I want to. So it's not a bad trade-off.
It's a
There's
pretty good
benefits
life.
and there's downfall. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just out of my own interest and curiosity, before we finish this up, I do want to give you some space to, as however you want to, but summarize your AT through hike. And you can, highlight anything that you want to, but because I have such an interest in the Appalachian Trail, I would love to hear anything you have to say about it.
I think I found the whole experience to be very inspirational. I spent a lot of time thinking about what was next and what else I wanted to do and what my goals were. And so, where I think like a lot of other people might consider like the AT being what you get inspired to do, the AT was more what inspired me to do after. And then it was definitely very much a coming of age and emotional experience for me, just feeling, there was a breakup before that. And so there was a lot of like loneliness and just uncertainty going into it, and continued to be a lot of loneliness on the trail as well. I did the first half of the trail without a tramily. I lost a grandfather while I was hiking and had to get off for his funeral, and had to get off for injuries and other situations where it kind of left me unable to hike with people while also dealing with grief or dealing with, concern and like fear of failure. And so I don't know, there's a lot of crying, and there was a lot of these like, it's funny, I talk about like, oh, Virginia was my favorite state. And I was like, I was so sad for all of Virginia. Like I cried so much
Oh,
in
wow.
Virginia. I don't know why that was like, but it was so beautiful, and it was springtime and the flowers were coming up, and I still met all of these incredible people. So it's definitely just like a little bit of both. And then about halfway through fell in with a group that I hiked with up through New Hampshire until I got hurt and had to spend a few weeks off before finishing. So, it was kind of both sides of the coin of feeling like so lonely when surrounded by people, to
Mm-hmm.
being a part of a close-knit group, to going back to being so lonely, because then I was off trail for 3 weeks and I got back on and I knew nobody, and was like crawling. I was doing like 6 mile days to the whites, and everybody else was just blowing past me. So it's just like a lot of up and down experiences. But like as soon like 1 week into trail, I was like, how do I get to do this? Like, how do I get to hike the PCT after this? And I still haven't hiked the PCT, but we attempted the CDT a few years ago. We got 700 miles of that. My husband broke his arm. We had to come home early, but it was
Oh,
still
no.
like a huge adventure. We did the Superior Hike and Trail with my dog. So my dog did end up coming on a backpacking trip with me, and she did 300 miles. So she's a complete badass. I've done the Foothills Trail in South Carolina twice, section hiking the MST. I did the Pinhoti Trail. I'm doing the Allegheny Trail this year. And so a big part of it was just like every time I was hiking along and finding out about a new trail, it's like, when can I get to it? How can I hike it? How do I figure that out?
Mm.
Yeah, so that was a long-winded answer, but I think it just served as inspiration that like, if you set your mind to something, fully acknowledging that there's a lot of like both privilege and good luck that goes into my ability to have made that happen, but there was still a lot of challenges and hurdles that had to be overcome to get there. And so if you decide that you're going to do something, with a little bit of good luck and people on your side, you can generally get there. And so that was just me realizing that, if I wanted something, I could reach out and take it. And what else did I want, and how was I going to do it?
That's cool. That is really cool. So the stretch through Virginia was a lonely, maybe learning time for you before you picked up a group. Now, even when you had the group, I mean, generally my understanding is everybody hikes their own hike, and you do different paces through the day and then kind of come back together at the end of the day. Was that how it was for you guys, or were you literally walking step in step through most of the trail?
No, we did a lot. Yeah, it was a lot of still time hiking alone, and then being together in towns and at camp and stuff. And then it actually kind of got to the point where that experience almost started to feel lonely too, because now the five of us have been hiking together the four of them have been hiking together since Helen, Georgia, and
Wow.
then I joined. And there was kind of like a revitalization, but it definitely felt it gets monotonous. The same way like when I see my husband every day and we sit down for dinner, it's kind of like, what else do we talk about? I was with you all day. How was your day? It was the same as mine. And so to sit down with your family at the end of the day and be like, how was your hike? And I don't know, I saw the same rock that you saw, like everything was the same. So it almost got to the point where it felt like, and then I wasn't starting conversations with other hikers because, I had my group and I was with them. And so, and this is not at all to bash on that family. Like I love them all to death. They're great people, but I felt like myself getting into this group where it was just kind of monotonous, and I felt more removed from other people because I wasn't going out of my way to make new friends. So I don't know, that was a part of that experience as well.
Yeah. Now after you got injured, what kind of injury did you have?
I rolled my ankle in the weights, and I just had so much, like I ended up dealing with plantar fasciitis really badly for all of 2019. Like I couldn't walk for like a year, really. Like I mean I could, but like to the point where I'd have to get, like if we were going out to eat and it was a long walk, I'd have to be dropped off at the restaurant instead of walk there from the parking lot, so I just had a lot of itis built up from the knees down. And I think it wasn't, it wasn't swollen. I got an x-ray, like nothing was broken, nothing was torn. It was just a lot of pain. And then I rolled my ankle in a way that it just kind of locked up. And I don't know, I went and got an x-ray and the doctor was like, you're walking too much. You got to walk less. Okay. Well, Maine is still, Katahdin is still another 300 miles away. So tell me something different. And she's like, you shouldn't finish the trail. So I did work for stay at a hostel in New Hampshire for 3 weeks, got back on trail. It wasn't really any better. And it was just so brutal because it was the whites. Once I got out of southern Maine, I don't think the injury really resolved itself, but it became a lot more doable to hike more than 8 miles in a day. So I just kind of limped to the end. It was great.
Oh, that hurts. And especially walking, you're not getting any relief from where the pain is. So, and so you've done parts of the CDT. You've mentioned several other trails. Is the PCT the big one that's out there for you right now? Like
I think the CDT still is.
Okay.
Like I gotta finish the CDT. I mean, if the opportunity presented itself to hike the PCT and it made more sense to do that than finish the CDT, I'm not gonna like get all picky about it, but I definitely feel like there's unfinished business. And I loved the CDT. I did not think I was going to like the desert. And I think New Mexico was one of the coolest places I've ever hiked. And
did you go northbound on it?
Yeah, I went northbound, and we were in Colorado, and we were probably up there a little bit too early. And I don't have any experience hiking in snow. And, you watch the videos on YouTube and you're like, it's not that bad. And we got up into the South San Juans, and it was just panic attacks and crying every day for me. So really looking forward to going back when it's not snowy. And it wasn't even like that bad. Like it wasn't one of the worst years, but it was so far out of my comfort zone. So
which part? The remoteness of it, or the snow, or what was it?
No, the snow, just the snow. Like post holing all day when it was flat, and then when you were on the traverses and the steep inclines and stuff. And like for context, my husband was, at the time boyfriend, was running around twirling his ice axe like it was a baton, having a grand old time, loving every second of it, doing glissades down mountains at 100 miles an hour. So like this is just, my comfort zone, and it being out of my comfort zone, which was quite the contrast between us as a hiking couple, where he's having the time of his life and I'm just like crying. Like, stop having fun. You can't do this. I'm not having fun. You can't have fun. So doing the traverses as the snow is, thigh deep, and you're post-holing into it when, you really, you're fine. But like if you did slip and fall, or if, a snow shell fell out or something, like you're sliding down super steep hills into rocks, and dependent on my upper body strength, of which there is none, to self-arrest with this ice axe. And then what happens? Like, how are you supposed to get back up? Like, I was not okay with any of that. And the altitude, I don't know, it's just like I felt like I never got sick or anything, but I just felt like so out of breath all the time, and everything was just so hard. So I'd love to go back when it's not covered in snow, and like get a little bit of my pride back in Colorado and see the rest of that whole trail. Yeah. So
That's cool.
so CDT would be a big one. Yeah.
If you're interested, I think it was episode 10, I interviewed a guy named Rob Angst, and he hiked the AT, and kind of the same thing you did, is like, oh, there's that PCT out there. Let me go do that. And then he hiked the PCT, and he was, I think, early 20s, no girlfriend, no, it was just him doing the next thing. Finished the PCT, and then he thought, well, there's this thing called the Triple Crown. Maybe I'll do the CDT. And without giving too much of the story away, that is the elusive piece for him as well. And maybe for a different reason, but it's still something that is a little voice in the wilderness, I think, calling. And I asked him too, is like, are you going to do it again? Because he tried several times. Weird scenarios happened, like really, really bizarre things outside of his control that took him off the trail. And he's like, I don't know that I will. Like, he just got to a point where it was almost like surrender to the inevitability of whatever. But there's something about the CDT that I think I've heard is pretty special.
A little elusive. Yeah. And I think any of the long distance trails, I mean, it's hard to be able to go 6 months without something coming up that gets you off, whether it's, to you personally or somebody in your family. And like, I'd love to Triple Crown, but it's not like, that's not my main goal. I've really fallen in love with the 200 to 300 mile trails. I think it's a great hiatus from life. You feel like hiker trash. You get to resupply and stay in towns. And 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, you're back to real life. And real life is fun enough for me now. That was something I realized when we left for the CDT. I was like, when we left for the AT, I was like, couldn't wait to like leave that, leave the house behind, leave the job behind. And then now it's like, oh, I like my house. I like my husband. I like my dog. There's a lot of things that I'm leaving behind. And so I think actually the 200 to 300 mile trips appeal to me a little bit more.
Makes sense.
Because I like being home. I like coming home.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's, as we evolve through adulthood, there's different things that resonate at different times. So that's probably inevitable as well. So I'll try to put a bow on the conversation, but what is the next thing that you're looking to do this year?
So Allegheny Trail in June.
Yes,
okay. Pretty sure that that's happening, pending like a signature or two to make things feel a little bit more official. So I'm really excited for that. I've wanted to do this style of hike for a long time. I've always just kind of kept a sketchbook and done little, like, maybe spend an hour on a painting, but to dedicate a whole through hike to creating larger work, I'm going to carry like a tube with 16 by 20 inch pieces of paper, and like every third or fourth day only do a 3 mile day so I can sit down and paint all day. So really merging those two experiences, and to do some more plein air painting has been a goal of mine for a while. So I'm really excited to kind of see a lot of my hiking experience and my painting experience, even though they've been very intertwined, to kind of come together in that experience. So super excited for that. We're going to Switzerland this summer. My husband has family there, so I get to go out and meet his grandma for the first time. But we are going to hike Tour de Mont Blanc, hopefully, while we're out there.
For real.
I'm hiking the Foothills Trail again in just a few weeks with some friends. Got some guiding trips lined up and some murals. So I started doing murals this past year. I got 4. I've got 3 in Damascus. One is at the Appalachian Trails Visitor Center, so it's on the AT. So that's super exciting.
Awesome.
And I have 26-foot painting on the Appalachian Trail, and that has really built a lot of momentum. So I'm hoping, or I'm seeing a little bit more of a financially successful future in the art world from a mural perspective. So I'm just like applying for those like crazy and having a lot of fun getting to work large scale and in the public, and have artwork that everybody's going to get to see. So
is that
all of those things?
As somebody that's not an artist, although I am seeing more and more the value of finding creativity in my life, but I think inevitably what comes with creativity, if you let anybody see it, is there's a level of vulnerability about how it's going to be received. So I'm curious for you that's putting something literally into the public for people to see over and over again. Is there some fear there or angst around what are people going to think, or have you been doing this long enough that maybe that voice is a little bit quieter than it used to be?
That that voice is always there, just chatting away, and I just acknowledge it, and I'm just like, it just like kind of goes through worst case scenarios of like, oh, what if this client comes back and says this or
Yes.
points this out or this happened, and it never happens. Like I've had, I think, one painting that went out into the world of what is at this point probably hundreds of paintings that I've sold, where somebody was like, oh, like that doesn't look right, fix it, and
Yeah.
or something that I wasn't able to fix and resolve easily and quickly. And so, of course, the whole time I'm sitting there painting, it's like, oh, what if the person who commissioned this
Mhm.
comes in and is like, this is wrong and this is wrong and that's not da da da. But it's never happened. And I do my research and do try to do a pretty good job of like learning a lesson with every single one. Okay, how could I have made this easier? How could I have communicated this clearer to make sure that something doesn't happen? And so far, knock on wood, have not had anything too crazy. And actually, one of the things that I've really loved working with murals, at least the three I did in Damascus, I was doing outdoor in the public. I did the one at the ATC the week leading up to trail days, so people are filtering into town,
Oh, cool.
and it is such an ego booster to just have dozens of people walk by you all day and tell you that you're awesome. It just does wonders. It just does wonders. Every person goes, wow, this is so cool. You're so talented. Like, oh, good. Like I just like feel that little meter just bopping
That's
up as I
great.
go throughout the day.
That is
So,
great.
so my ego really doesn't mind painting in public and having people tell me how cool I am all day. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. But the voice doesn't go away. That's, you're saying you still hear it, but the other part of your brain can accept the compliments as honest and true, and yet that voice still is trying to convince you otherwise.
Yeah, it's there, and then I think it's really justified. And from a business perspective, I feel definitely like I'm just kind of fumbling through all of that, and there's a lot of mistakes being made and things I should do better in communication that could be better. But
Yeah.
I've been doing art for a long enough time, like I'm always going to look at a painting and see things that can be improved, but I understand that I'm a good artist.
Yeah.
I like the way they turn out for the most part. And there are several that when I'm done, I'm like, I don't know if I would change anything, even if I could.
Yeah.
So happy to just keep doing that. And I definitely feel like I've been doing art for so long that I'm confident in that realm.
Yeah. Well, before we finish, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell folks listening where they can find your artwork. I love your artwork. I think,
Thank you.
it is amazing. And for somebody that has spent time in these different places, it almost brings back maybe not the smell, but the sense of being in these locations. You have vivid colors and vivid kind of descriptions of the areas that you're painting in a way that it brings it, kind of transports me to these different places that I've been on the trail. And I'm certainly not near as prolific on the trail as you have been, but I think you're really good. So I think folks are going to really dig it when they look at it.
Thank you so much. And that's exactly the goal, is to transport the viewer to their experiences there, or else invite them to go and have their own
Yeah.
experiences in those locations, and just kind of remind everybody that we have this public land and it is here and it is for all of us. And for the most part, in one way or another, is accessible. So we're very fortunate to have the public land that we do, and we need to take advantage of it and see and experience it. My website is sketchingsummits.com, and my Instagram is sketching summits, and I'm on Facebook as sketching summits as well. I am on TikTok intermittently,
All right.
because I'm that phase of a millennial that's like trying to be like young and hip, but also just too exhausted to put too much effort into
Yeah.
it. And yeah, I've got 3 murals in Damascus, one at the ATC Trail Center, 2 in Laurel Creek Park, which is just a block off of Laurel Ave. And I'll be at Trail Days as a vendor. Just found that out yesterday. So super
Sweet.
excited. My first time getting to vend in the official vendor village of Trail Days, and probably some other things, but I'm blanking. But I try to keep an events like tab open on my website, so you can find ways to connect or participate
Yeah, you've got a great
in the
website
future.
too. I was
Oh, thank
thumbing
you.
through that. That's
It
for
looks
somebody that,
better on a desktop than a mobile, but
What's that?
It's all right. I said it looks better on a desktop than a mobile
Gotcha.
device, but it gets
Yeah.
the job done. It could be better. So I appreciate you saying that because
Well, it's not easy. It's somebody that has a business and has to create a website and keep it running, and getting it to look good is not as easy as you might think it is. So
it's such a pain in the butt.
yeah, yeah.
So thank you.
So I'll link to the page and all your different handles in the show notes so folks can find you, and hopefully maybe you get some new takers on buying some of your artwork. But if nothing else, we'll make more people know about Heidi Nisbet and the things that you're getting involved with. So let's wrap with this. And I'm just, again, being a podcast on adventure, you've described very, very well how you have pursued that in different ways in your life. But if you could summarize what adventure means to you, how would you put that in your own words?
An opportunity, adventure should serve or can serve or does serve as an opportunity to reconnect with yourself and connect with those around you and the environments around you in an authentic way through experience. Something like that. I could probably be a little bit more eloquent,
that's actually
but
really cool.
getting the point across. Thank you.
Yeah, getting it, the kind of a three-pronged connection to ourself, to other people, humanity, and to the environment. I've never thought about it that way, but I think that's the magic sauce of doing adventures, is if you can check those three things, it's probably been a pretty meaningful time, whatever the adventure is. And we didn't spend a whole lot of time, but would you say that the people part of the things that you've done has been a big part of the experience for you?
It's a huge impact, but I think, the Allegheny Trail is, I do have a hiking partner going out with me, but I don't really anticipate running into a whole lot of people on trail. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of within the communities, and I'm excited for those experiences. But, and I'm an extrovert, so I do like having people around, but to have, I don't know, I like hiking alone in the woods too. So I think there's something to be gained from all of the elements, but definitely the people. I mean, especially on the AT, that experience was so formed by the people that I was around and I was with. So absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, we'll finish it there. And Heidi, you've been incredibly generous with your time to have this conversation with me, and I greatly appreciate it. And hopefully maybe at some point down the road, we can do it again and catch up on the latest things that you're getting into. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks for listening. And I sincerely mean that, because I'm extremely grateful that you choose to spend this time with me. I don't take it for granted, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, be sure to check out material on my website at ridgelinewealthadvisors.com. That's advisors with an ORS. And sign up for my monthly newsletter, The Money Trail Guide, which you can find on the blog page. Until next time, I hope you pursue your own great adventure.